Frontiers was actually founded with a very simple mission. We're here to make all of science open so that everyone can live a healthy life on a healthy planet. Why is this mission so important? Let me illustrate this very quickly on the COVID pandemic, which has shown just very clearly how essential it is to share scientific results openly. So just last year alone, about 200,000 coronavirus-related articles were published. And most of these articles were made open access, even those that were published in subscription journals, because the urgency of the pandemic just made it crystal clear that every scientific result on COVID needs to be shared rapidly and openly. And only because that has happened were scientists across the world able to collaborate far more effectively and deliver. They delivered treatments and vaccines at a speed never ever seen before in human history. So here in our Frontiers Forum, we do like to highlight these urgent challenges and also their science-led solutions. How to revert climate change, how to protect biodiversity, how to switch to clean energy, how to produce food sustainably for billions of people, and of course, how to enable healthy and prosperous lives for everybody on this planet. So the visionary work of today's speaker really touches on several of these grand challenges, and he has made absolutely amazing progress towards achieving our common goal of healthy lives on a healthy planet, and also enabling us really to live in harmony with nature. Professor Kongjian Yu is the founder and the dean of the Graduate School of Landscape Architecture at Peking University. He also founded Turnscape, a landscape architecture and urban design firm, which was recognized with many international awards. Kongjian as well pioneered really the concept of sponge cities, which he will be talking about today. And in this concept of sponge cities, water is not separated from cities through drains, channels, or dams, but water is really integrated and absorbed by our cities. And as you'll see, this not only helps to solve several problems such as flooding, pollution, or water scarcity in our cities, but it also restores habitats for our biodiversity. And it also just creates really beautiful spaces for people to live in. So with this, it is my absolutely great pleasure to hand the floor to Kongjian now.
It is my great honor to share with you my experience of using nature-based solution to heal the world's cities. We are facing so many challenges: climate change, flood, drought, habitat loss, pollution. Conventionally, we have this great infrastructure based on industrial technologies, stronger and increasingly more sophisticated infrastructures, damming the river, higher and higher flood walls fight against water, channelize the river to drain away the flood, and the sophisticated sewage plant to clean the water. Now, great infrastructure can be necessary to solve urgent individual problems, but it consumes huge amount of concrete and energy, lacks resilience, and often accumulate higher risk of disasters, destroying natural system and its resiliency, breaks the connection between man and nature. So the alternative is nature-based solutions. A nature-based ecological infrastructure, which is critical for securing ecosystem services, woven together great infrastructure from the nature conservation upstream to rural and urban pollution remediation and the restoration of coastal area. Now, such ecological infrastructure have to be planned and built across scales: national, regional, and local. Water is a key for this kind of ecological infrastructure. A city built on water-centered ecological infrastructure is called a sponge city. Its philosophy is to retain water, slow down water, and be adaptive to water, which is totally opposite to the conventional solution of gray infrastructure, which is centralize water resources and water supply, speed up the water flow to drain away flood, and fight against water at the end. Sponge cities are inspired by the ancient wisdom of farming, water management, that use very simple tool to transform the global surface at a vast scale. My institute and my firm, we've been testing and trying this kind of skills, such as terracing the slope, pounding the ground, diking and pounding the swamp, and islanding the lake. For over 20 years, we have tested and built over 500 projects in more than 200 cities, and developed several replicable models to heal the land at various scales, from North China to South China, from America to Russia. We're focusing on major targets such as flood adaptation, stormwater management, water cleansing, climate resiliency, soil remediation. These projects are always holistically and systematically designed, not single-minded, holistic, to provide all kinds of ecosystem services for native species, for people, and the planet as a whole. In China, all urban rivers have been dammed and channelized with concrete flood walls. More than $20 billion is invested to control flooding, but $100 billion is lost every year because of flood. We have to end this never-ending war, but that not just mean we have to build a higher and higher flood wall to dump so much concrete. Instead, we go to nature, use nature-based solution. Now, this is an example in my own hometown in China's Zhejiang province, Jinhua City. We actually removed concrete flood wall. Look at this, how strong, powerful the flood wall looks like. But it is lifeless, it is very dangerous, no resilience at all. So we transform it. We created terraces, a terraced bank, use vegetation, and let water come in the land so that this river become more resilient. And this 100-year flood, this 20-year flood, so that this city will become more safe, actually. Now, such kind of ecological embankment can reduce peak flow by more than half. Imagine, over 65% of Chinese cities suffer from urban inundation. And I can say almost all cities in the monsoon climate, whether it's in Southeast Asia or South America, are suffering, every city almost suffering urban inundation. Now, does that mean we have to build thicker drainage pipes or more powerful pumps? Not necessary. We are inspired by the ancient wisdom, simple tools, terracing, pounding, islanding. We create a sponge, a green sponge in the middle of the city. In this case, it is in Hainan Island, Sanya city in South China. A huge piece of green space in the middle of the city. Now this is a rendering. Just a year later, fairly simple tool, cut and fill, no transportation of dirt in or out. And in just 1 year, 2 years later, and 3 years later, we not only create a green sponge for remediation of stormwater, but a beautiful park for people and recovered habitat for biodiversity. That's 2016. You can see how serious urban flood is. And just 4 years later, we completely solved the problem. But not only that, the property value tripled in this case, tripled, imagine. You can see here also, it catalyzed the urban development. So ecology and economy here is the same thing now. Imagine 75% of the surface water is contaminated in China, and 85% of sewage globally goes to rivers and sea untreated. We need alternative, affordable, and fast solution, inexpensive, efficient. Now the nature can do the work. Constructed wetland can remove nutrient from biological process, but at the same time produce productive habitat for biodiversity, for food, even for vegetable in some cases. This is an example in Shanghai, the Huangpu River, heavily contaminated 13 years ago. We designed a living landscape on a former brownfield to treat polluted water and recover the degraded waterfront in an aesthetically pleasing way. So the park, the 3 hectares of constructed wetland filters phosphorus and nitrogen from 2,400 cubic meters of water every day. And you can see here, the test shows that 85% of nutrients can be removed. Now, this can be a very effective solution for larger scale water issues. The Bohai Sea, imagine more than 700,000 square kilometers in size, is seriously contaminated and become a dead sea. So in a pilot project, we create a green sponge along the coastal shoreline to catch and stop the chemicals from running into the sea. And it's been tested performs very well. Climate change, of course, means higher risk of storm, of surge. But does that mean we have to build a higher and stronger concrete wall? Not necessarily, maybe. Nature can do the work. Mangrove, for example. But the key challenge is that we have to find an efficient and inexpensive method to reestablish the mangroves that have been destroyed. In this case, urban construction debris and concrete from the demolition of flood walls was recycled on site, and an interlocking finger design was used to lead ocean tide into the waterways to speed up the process of mangrove establishment. So create ideal ecotones for mangrove to establish itself. So in just 3 years, a lifeless land within a concrete flood wall was transformed into a lush mangrove park. This is 3 years later, you can see. Imagine 60% of urban soil is contaminated in China. And the conventional remediation is usually very expensive. But we can let nature do the work. So in this case, in Tianjin, a huge brownfield, right in the middle of the city, alkaline soil, polluted. So we create a sponge, green sponge, collect stormwater. Aciduous stormwater will dissolve the alkaline brownfield and initiated the natural process of vegetation. So in just a couple of years, we created a native green sponge right in the middle of the city for native species, for remediating the soil, for collecting stormwater, and at the same time, create a beautiful park for people to enjoy. But we are not talking about just a piece of land, a piece of park in the city. We are talking about the transformation, the whole infrastructure turn from gray into green. This is another example in Haikou in China, Haikou City, a major river drainage system, a whole system. Again, because of the monsoon climate, it suffers flood and drought, and the river polluted. So a conventional solution is keep building higher and higher wall, keep dredging the riverbed, but never success. For 20 years, the river become a problem for the city. So just 5 years ago, we tried this green infrastructure, the green solution. We actually remove concrete. It really removes concrete and terracing the riverbank, give water more space, catch stormwater runoff, even clean up the urban sewage, some part of urban sewage, because they are not connected to the centralized sewage system. So in just a few years, the whole drainage system, the Mother River system in the city get cleansed, get recovered. 85% of the nutrients get removed, and the habitat recovered in the dense city center. Birds come back, fish come back. Similarly, in Russia, the polluted and concrete waterfront has been healed and revitalized through the nature-based intervention in just a couple of years. Now, in the past 5 decades, China has built over 60 billion square meters of buildings, but 99% of them are energy inefficient, consuming about 50% of total energy consumption. But nature-based solution may help to solve this big problem. In my own home, I collect stormwater and energy from the roof and grow vegetables on the balcony. I produce 32 kilograms of vegetables each year. I collect 50 tons of rainwater each year, and I recycle the water to create a living wall to air condition the home and save 2,000 kilowatts of electricity. This helps show the community that everyone can contribute to healing the planet by practicing simple nature-based solutions at home. So more than ever, we have to rethink the way we build our cities, the way we treated water and nature, and even the way we define civilization, not by how much GDP, not by how much concrete we use, not about how thick the drainage pipe system, and not about how powerful the pump is. It is about how can we make nature. Sponge city or sponge planet is a holistic and nature-based solution to protect and restore ecological infrastructure and make wise use of nature's services for the benefit of the planet and the welfare of people. And we have to think like a king, the king who had the vision of healing the earth and living with nature. But we have to act like a peasant, not by very sophisticated technologies, but it's very simple tools. Individually may be small, but collectively, down to earth, create a fast green planet, transform gray into green. Now, that's my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Kongjian. And I can hear the collective applause from around the world, because it was an absolutely amazing, inspiring talk. And and your passion comes through so clearly. Congratulations. It was really a very, very inspiring presentation. The 1.5 thousand people who have joined us, I think we all agree that it was really, really inspiring. I think that I think you should get a trademark for the expression "let nature do the work." I think you should try to get a copyright on that, because I think that's a great expression. As the MC, I get to ask the first question, and as I was looking through the presentation, the one thing that came to my mind was climate change is about flooding, it's about storms, but it's also about drought. And you mentioned drought on one side. So Sponge City, how does that fit into a sort of like areas of the world which is becoming drier?
The whole idea of Sponge City, as I mentioned, is the philosophy is to retain water on site, to collect the water on site, and to recharge the aquifer, to keep the water underground, because I deleted one slide. The slide shows that the groundwater drop a meter every year in central China and in Beijing. Yeah. So keep the water, not build big reservoirs, but keep distributed like nature, like sponge. So increase the resiliency of nature, of the ground, of the planet. That's a key. Now, whether it is a flood area or drought area.
I think that, the simple sponge is such a powerful concept in many ways. So I think we're going to move right on to the informal discussion with our expert contributors. Our first contributor today is going to step in for Jaime Pumarejo, who had planned to be with us to talk about some of the work they're doing in this direction in Barranquilla, which is a city in Colombia, which is located near the Caribbean Sea, and which has really taken a lead in urban biodiversity. Mr. Pumarejo very kindly suggested that his colleague Ricardo Vives, who is a Colombian architect and who works with a global perspective on urban planning and city projects, that he step in on his behalf and talk a little bit about the project. Barranquilla, as you know, so some of you may know, is a city that through which the Magdalena River flows, and as we talked a little bit in the chat ahead of time, it has actually been confronted with some of these issues. So now we just say a few words about Ricardo. He's the project coordinator for the Biodiversity Project, which is a collaboration between the World Economic Forum and the government of Colombia that hopes to create sustainable cities through a new urban development model that just as Kongjian emphasizes, must remain in harmony with nature. So Ricardo has managed a number of projects around the world, including Southern Europe and the Middle East, and his involvement is as the coordinator of this biodiversity project. So with this, I hand over the word to Ricardo, who will say a few words about biodiversities, and then we'll have a question or two for Kongjian.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Fred. And again, thank you for the invitation. And let me start by saying what everybody else is thinking, and just thank you, Professor Yu, because it has been amazing to see some of your work, and it's just very inspiring. So I just wanted, as Fred mentioned, say a quick word about Barranquilla and what we're doing over here. In recent years, we've suffered what many cities suffered in sprawl and just careless treatment of our environment and our ecosystem. And only recently have we understood that we stand and our geographic location is privileged. We're right at the edge of the Magdalena River, which is the largest country in Colombia, right on the edge of the Caribbean Sea. And we have an amazing delta with a mangrove system. It's just as a jewel of a landscape. And we have recently understood that we have this commitment and that we obviously need to change the way we treat it. And this is where the biodiverse city with a C program enters, and it follows up on what our president has been saying and speaking about, and just trying to understand how a Latin American city in a developing country should approach and should face the climate action plan and the climate change and all these challenges that face us as a global community. I love the idea and I agree that you should patent it, and it's a let nature do the work, because in the end, as much as we try, it's up to nature for itself, and we just need to give her room, give her time, give her space. So what we're trying to do is try to make a very aggressive and very ambitious agenda called biodiversity, and understanding that everybody in Barranquilla is biodiverse city. And it compiles a wide range of strategies, from soft strategies, obviously recycling, clean energy, and on all of the above, and also major green and blue infrastructure interventions, hopefully similar to what you have showed us in your presentation. We have the recovery of a channel system and the recovery of a large urban lagoon that we have with a mangrove system that surrounds it, and major urban forests, 30, 40 hectare parks with urban forests. And basically what we're trying to do is again, and put so simply and elegantly, is let nature do its work. And I guess what we're really struggling with in terms of time is understanding where do we go from here. It's an ongoing, and it's a very permanent and a very long road that we have ahead of us. And maybe what I'm trying to grasp, and just taking advantage of the situation and speaking about sponge cities, is that in Barranquilla we have been suffering from intense flash floods during the rainy season for quite a while. It used to be a very bad image that we have in the city, which is basically a massive river pouring down one of the streets, and it's because we didn't have a drainage system. A lot has been done in gray infrastructure, just the basics, and just trying to save lives and save the environment, and basically long strides have been done in trying to solve this very long overdue problem of having flash floods.
Mm-hmm.
But looking forward and trying to match this minimum requirements of stormwater drainage systems that we had to build, what is the next step? And I'm guessing, from what I've seen in your presentation, that it lies, and part of the solution might lie in the idea of a sponge city. Mm-hmm. So maybe if you could just help us out and give us a couple of ideas of what other complementary nature-based approaches could a city like Barranquilla in a developing country try to implement, and what would be like the fastest or the quickest way to start helping nature do its work?
Well, I happen to be in the jury to select your project. Barranquilla, the river, you move the highway and give river more space, and that's a wonderful project. That's a compliment.
Thank you.
If it's a IFRA jury, you get the award.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it is. Sponge City is the whole idea. Is Sponge City is to distribute the water resources at the source, either from the rooftop or from your backyard, distribute, not channelized, not concentrated by pipeline system. I was in Mexico last year. It was the same problem. Mexico City got the same problem. Now they try to build a thicker pipe to drain away the stormwater, but unfortunately, they drain away at the same time. They drain away the water resources. So Sponge City actually keeps water, retains the water, right, and recharges the aquifer. So my suggestion will be think ecology, think the nature holistically. It can provide all kinds of services. If you invest in produces a green space, you think about create space for water, but also for people to use. Also can create a farm. It's a holistic, so ecosystem services, not just simple solution. It's so easy to create a big pipe, but imagine drought, drought is more serious than flood in China. We lose 70% of disaster because drought, only 30% because of flood. So water resources, global-wise, is we have to keep water, retain water, recycle water. So that's why my suggestion for you is to do a systematic master plan for the city, separate sewage from drainage. I mean, stormwater drainage. Now, there's a common problem for developing country is you mix the drainage pipe system with a stormwater system. You always let the stormwater go into the drainage, I mean the sewage system. And eventually, the sewage plant cannot afford this stormwater. So that's why you pollute the river during the reason and pollute the ocean at the same time. So make a plan to separate the gray with green and build a sponge system, totally green, and integrate with pedestrian park system, biodiversity at the same time, and the farms and the rooftop and everyone's backyard. Right? That's a whole idea of sponge city.
Thank you very much, Kongjian. Ricardo, thanks for the short presentation, and thanks, Kongjian. We'll have time to continue the discussion afterwards, but I think I'd like to move forward to our next expert contributor, who is Clara Irazábal, who is Director of Urban Studies and the Planning Program at the University of Maryland School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation. She started out her career as an architect, but then became interested in understanding urban challenges and the forces that shape cities. So her research looks at the impact of urban planning on people's lives for the better and for the worse, with the goal of ensuring that built environments create social equity, opportunity, and vibrant communities. So a lot of her work has been focused on Latin American cities, as well as on immigrant and minority communities in the US, including looking at the interactions between culture, politics, placemaking, and their impact on community development. So Clara, with that short introduction, over to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to offer some comments and also to ask some questions about this fantastic work. Professor Kongjian Yu, I appreciate tremendously your work. I thank you for it. It is indeed healing the world's cities, but it is also healing us in the process and allowing nature to heal us. So it's a spiraling up dynamics of a very good cycle, I think. Your approach is still unconventional, I would argue, in most part of the world that is still resisting water instead of embracing water. And even though it might be something that this particular audience understands and appreciates and integrates into their lives and their work, is still resisted on a number of fronts. But that is why I think my greatest appreciation for your work is that you go with it from theory to action, because there are more and more of us that believe in this approach, but not all of us have had the opportunity to demonstrate it in action as you have done with your projects and then show us the way on how to do it. I think critical to it is your approach to considering nature in an integral, holistic, systemic way. And as you do that, I would argue you push us to do better in many realms of justice. I think that your project allows us to do more interspecies justice. It's not only about the well-being of human beings, it's about the well-being of other species and nature at large. And in doing so, it's also pushing for greater intergenerational justice, because the positive effects of those interventions accrue over time. And as it does that, it also supports restorative and reparative justice, because it does away with the injustices that many of socially disadvantaged groups have suffered historically and continue to suffer in our cities. And I'm referring here most particularly to low-income groups and minoritized, racialized groups that are the ones that are suffering the gravest consequences of climate change. And I think that your interventions are healing in that regard as well. They are also interscalar. You said they need to operate and do things at the local, regional, national, and global levels in order for them to work synergistically to create those systems that you refer. And they are urgent interventions. As climate change, the impact of climate change grow, your interventions become ever more urgent, but you have shown us, fortunately, that they are economical, meaning they are cost effective and they are efficient. So we should go for that, even if we want to save some bucks, right? So all of that is phenomenal. Now, I would like to follow with two questions for you. One is of a practical nature and the other is of a philosophical nature. So starting with the practical one, you show us that you have done projects in more than 500 projects in more than 20 cities around the world in multiple countries. In your experience then, what are the most common and relentless barriers that you and your firm have encountered and needed to face and overcome in order for this type of projects and the sponge city concept in general to be accepted? Are those challenges of financial, political, bureaucratic, cultural nature? And in here that I'm speaking to a lot of designers, are those challenges entrenched traditions of design that incline us to resist nature as opposed to embrace and go with nature? Do these challenges vary from city to city, from project to project, from country to country, or are they more common across countries and cities? Do these challenges, what would be then your advice for design and planning practitioners and also policymakers to overcome those challenges?
You ask the right question. We are talking about different civilizations. The industrial civilization, which we are educated, the whole university system, the intellectual infrastructure is talking about calculation of flow, the section of concrete section to channelize the river, the building dams, engineering, the Army Corps, the American Army Corps, powerful, they are powerful. We believe that this dam can solve the problem forever. But imagine the New Orleans, one even powerful dam can break, right? Any powerful can. So, but we are educated this way. Now, so the most difficult barrier, the barrier is the mentality, is the intellectual system, is a partial science. The engineer based on pseudoscience. I will say, I'm sorry to say pseudoscience. So we have to go back to real science, a systematic, serious science. It's about the system, not about a single-minded one goal shot. That's engineer great infrastructure usually do, but that's against science. So that's the huge barrier. And unfortunately, this pseudoscience being coded, the code system which protect the innovation to like a sponge city, because we want to remove concrete, people suddenly get scared. Okay, we are not safe now. Remove concrete. So that's huge barrier. The second barrier is certainly the power, the political power. Well, in my system, in my country, we have the top-down system. So the most difficult for me is to convince the mayor as a top leadership. Now I'm happy, I'm hopeful because we have convinced at least 200 mayors to do the work. Yeah. So But well, in your country, or maybe in some more democratic countries, like you have to really have to convince everybody to do that. No, now that maybe you need a different way. You need a more community to get involved, or you maybe need a more business model or marketing system to build this kind of sponge city. Well, I was in Mexico, the similar situation, you know. That's difficult because every piece of land is privatized. In America, it's the same. Every piece of land is privatized. So it is difficult if by this just to do it, you cannot do it. So a business model is needed. Maybe you need a fund to buy the land and give them back beautiful house, better house. Now I show you that ecology and economy is the same thing. If you build a beautiful ecology system, your property value will double or even triple. Now that's in marketing system. Maybe you should do that. Yeah. So we have to go through intellectual, the most difficult system, need a new civilization, new mentality to think that nature can do work. Nature is not just resources, nature provides the services, right? The second, certainly, we have to go to educate media. The media to educate the grassroots system, like everybody. The last case I show you that, like everybody to show that your green wall can solve the problem. Not only save your money, but to save the planet. Right? So that's a grassroots system. But the centralized system is you have to convince the top leadership. Mm-hmm. So even the president, even the prime minister. So I wrote many letters to prime minister, to my president in China. I have a book called The Letter to Leader of China. It's in English now. We are so happy to successfully convince from the minister to top leadership of China, and also some ministers, the mayors. And they say, now sponge city become a national campaign here in China. Yeah. So that's my answer to your question.
My second question is more philosophical in nature. Is that you have told us that water is our friend. You have even told us that floods are our friends. And your projects show that these notions are very productive and transformational in giving us the type of projects that you showed us here. But I'd like to push a little bit farther this philosophical approach of water philia and suggest that there are no distinctions between us and water, that we are water and that water is us. As a matter of fact, we're about 60% water, our human body. So a notion of oneness or a continuum of nature that we are part of. Does this resonate with you? And if so, do you see value in it for your practice, and how so?
So water is the key. Water, because we have water. If you have water, you have life, right? Water is the key for the globe, for our planet. Water is life. Water is life. So water philia. That's why so I'm talking about the key. If you manage water well, you can recover the planet. I will say that. So I totally agree. Human being is water. It is philosophical. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, Clara. Thank you so very much. And again, this is a theme that we can kind of pick up again towards the end, depending upon how the discussion goes. And with that, I'd like to invite our third expert contributor, Sangwon Suh. Sangwon is professor of industrial ecology in the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management at the University of California in Santa Barbara. He's also the field chief editor of the Frontiers Journal, Frontiers in Sustainability. Sangwon's research looks at the exchange of materials and energy between people and nature, so it's particularly relevant to the discussion today, which among other things has contributed towards the quantitative sustainability assessment in areas of life cycle assessment and in industrial ecology. So he has a very strong interest in climate resiliency. I think that'll be a word that we'll hear a couple of times in his opening remarks, and has contributed to the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, as a coordinating lead author. So, Sangwon, I hope that with those words, you'll be able to pick up and say a little bit about your perspectives.
I thank Professor Kongjian Yu for walking us through the concept and truly remarkable applications of Sponge City. I don't know whether you are interested in doing an Airbnb as a host. If you do, let me know, because I want to stay in your inspiring house. It's a truly remarkable that what you have done in your house. In my humble opinion, the history of mankind was by and large about fighting nature. It has been about creating the environment, a man-made environment that is so foreign to the ecosystem and nature that the two could not amicably coexist on this planet. Just came out this week was the new finding that current extinction rate of European freshwater gastropods are 3 orders of magnitude higher than the most recent estimates of the past mass extinction event, in particular the Cretaceous Paleogene mass extinction 66 million years ago, which decimated 92.5% of all species on this planet. And what we are doing is 3 orders of magnitude higher than that. Think about that. This is not sustainable, and we gotta be able to find the ways in which we can live with nature, not against nature. It's suicidal. I truly believe that it is the duty of our time as scientists to find a way to reconcile humans and nature. In that respect, I very much welcome and appreciate the effort that Kongjian has brought to the light, not only in the ivory tower, but also in the field with global cities. It's truly remarkable. Our new journal, Frontiers in Sustainability, was launched precisely to share our advances in tackling such global sustainability challenges. I would welcome your contributions to Frontiers in Sustainability. So my first question is about building resilience under extreme uncertainty. Modern infrastructure systems are designed following government mandates and specifications, to my understanding. I lived in the Netherlands for a while, and I learned that the Dutch government developed a series of stringent specifications for dikes, pumps, and dams to prevent the worst of the worst after the North Sea flood of 1953 that killed more than 1,800 people. But the problem is that what was considered as the worst of the worst is now getting even worse under climate change. So that existing specifications, which we thought were bulletproof, are not enough anymore. I think that the problem is that we don't exactly know what the beast that our future generations will have to face will look like, while what we are building now will have to last for a long time. In this situation, how can we create the design specifications for public infrastructure that ensure resilience and at the same time economic viability, given that in the end, taxpayers should be able to pay for the bill? So that would be my first question, Kongjian.
All my project I want to show you is that it is very small intervention, easy working. Imagine the whole globe is transformed by one single tool. The whole, just cut and fill, cut and fill. We transform the whole globe from the top mountain in top mountain in China, 2,000 meters high elevation. It's been terraced. It's been terraced, the whole area. Yeah? When you look at Aztec people, the Mexican people, they grow food on the lake. Right? Grow food on the lake. Indonesia, the rice paddies. Straight miles and miles of rice paddies. So these are thousands of years experience being adaptive to nature and make survive. Simple, easy, productive, beautiful. So, and imagine we build a concrete, every concrete flood wall have only 20-year or 30-year or even 100-year lifespan. They're going to break someday. When they break, the water will pour down, like New Orleans. That's a good example, right? So the artificial industrial industrially built infrastructure is accumulating risk. So the only thing we can do with nature is adapt it, wisely adapt to nature, right? So, and certainly, what about the mitigation right now? Flood coming in next day. I studied the Chinese wisdom. They only build the threshold a meter high, a threshold, not as a flood wall, only a threshold, 2 meters long and a meter high. So when 100-year flood or 1,000-year flood come in, you get this threshold and the flood goes away. And in North China, we have another wisdom. We build this roof flat. Now this is a 1,000-year flood. Once a 1,000-year flood come, you just go to rooftop, right? Economically very well, right? You don't have to build a 20-meter high wall. The flood never come, you know, that's economical calculation. About urban inundation, why do you bother to build this 5-meter thick pipe, right? But climate change suddenly comes and the 300-meter precipitation, 300 millimeter precipitation pouring in just one day, you flood the whole city. Yeah, like Paris, like London. So it used to be very mild climate. Now our cities suffering urban flood because the industrial technology is not resilient. Simple. So it's a new civilization. We have to go back to nature, right? We are not just go back to, agricultural civilization. I'm not saying we go back to 2,000 years ago. We have to upgrade those ancient wisdom based on scientific understanding, systematic understanding, the new science, create a new system of intellectual system. Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. I think the decoding the ancient wisdom with science, with modern science, I think that's really the key. Thank you. So my second question is about the industry and private sector perspective. I see that investors and private sectors are increasingly recognizing climate change as real risk factor for businesses, and climate-related financial risks are now actively incorporated into investment decisions as well as siting decisions for industry infrastructure. A well-known example is Hewlett-Packard's recent relocation of its Houston facility to Wisconsin after taking 93 million storm damage in 2017. So you highlighted Sponge City from a public infrastructure point of view, right? But can you comment on whether the Sponge City concept might be applicable to a private sector? For example, can the idea help mitigate climate-related financial risks for businesses or help companies making siting decisions for industrial infrastructure? Any thought on how private sector can benefit from or contribute to Sponge City would be appreciated. Thank you.
Good. So it's a two questions. So it's siting. We studied that the whole China, for example, we only need 1% of land for water. You know, only need 1%. Why bother to take water space? Give water more space. That's rule number one. Right? Whole globe. We have enough upland to build all cities. Why bother to compete with water? So that's rule number one. The second, of course, everyone should contribute. Your backyard, your rooftop, your front yard, the street, right? The park system. So that's everyone should create their own water remediation green sponge in what they can do it. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Sangwon and Kongjian. I think what we're going to do now, and I hope everybody is ready for really one of the most interesting parts of these Frontiers Forums, the open questions. So I think we're going to. A lot of questions are coming across. I want to ask if Julia Africa still with us in the among the listeners?
Professor Yu, as always, it's an incredible honor to hear you describe your work. You're an inspiration to all of us. I know you'll hear that repeated. Many of the attendees have been so taken with this phrase, let nature do the work. And I wonder if you can comment on whether you feel you're having let nature do the work, that is, having produced these extraordinary designs, has actually acted to prompt the Chinese government to create more stringent environmental regulation, and specifically regulation of chemical contamination of environments, so that plants maybe do not have to do quite so much work.
I help the Chinese government to regulate 4 related regulations about land use planning, about environmental protection, basically based on my understanding how to protect the most critical, most sensitive ecosystem services. I defined called ecological security pattern, which is based on my thesis at the JST at Harvard, is about this definition, spatial infrastructure, nature's infrastructure based on the analysis of ecological system. So securing, we call it ecological security pattern. Yeah. So it's more special. Well, I didn't contribute to anything about the environmental pollution things, yes, but basically land-based, spatial-based, ecosystem-based. Yeah.
Okay.
Now 4 regulations. For example, the Chinese government have for 3 years now, the Congress passed the law to define the ecological baseline, ecological red line, which means you will not touch this ecological security based on this, and that's become a top number 1 national regulation today.
The next person I'd like to invite is Tal Burstyn-Cohen. Tal, I hope you're still with us to ask your question.
Thank you. I come from a totally different discipline. I'm a neurobiologist and a cancer biologist, but this is fascinating to me. And I was wondering actually about these large water bodies. And living in Israel, we have a lot of mosquitoes, and I was wondering, how do you monitor for all these biological contaminants? The previous question was about maybe chemical ones, but biological contaminants and diseases in the water, and whether these also water bodies can be harnessed also to deal with biological waste also.
This is a usual question. Mosquitoes and insects, yes, of course, but there's mosquitoes happen when the water body is not healthy, which means you have no frog, no fish, then you come mosquitoes, right? So in my home, I have fish in my water body, So fish eat the larva of the mosquito. So that's easy. So the healthy ecosystem will solve the problem. Now, we cannot prevent any single mosquito. Of course, you have some kind of mosquito, but that's not a big issue. If too many mosquito, which means you don't have frogs, you have no frogs, you have no lizard, you have no fish. So create a healthy ecosystem. That's the whole key. So holistically, no chemicals. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Bjorn, I think you were interested in being able to interact too. Bjorn, are you ready to pick up the microphone?
Yeah.
Terrific.
Good. Yeah, I could continue asking sort of what Tal started regarding sort of diseases and so on, because I'm working quite a lot also with circulating of wastewater and reusing the new plant nutrients and so on. And it's the reduction you have in your system is very amazing regarding plant nutrients. But then when you get sort of this water connected, and it's a very nice habitat for people to be in. And the question we get quite a lot when we look into recycling stuff is, how is it about pathogens? For example, when you have this kind of water, I would guess that it will attract people to maybe to swim and also to fish. And when you have, like you said, it's only 20% of the water that is, or the wastewater that is treated. So in arid areas, the water that you have in the rivers is more or less wastewater. And then having people swimming in wastewater maybe is not the best option. So are you looking into that, and how are you dealing with sort of the risk of spreading diseases?
Yeah, you ask us the right question. We have tests, we have observations. So it's at a safety, public health safety standards. Yeah. So you have to bio agents, and you can remove, so you have to pre-treatment. Pre-treatment at the beginning, that's needed to kill this disease, of course. Yeah, bacteria and this thing. So it's under control before they run into the wetland system.
Bjorn, thanks for the question. Steve Woodley. Steve, are you there? Would you like to ask your question?
I wanted to ask if you had any information about how the sponge cities have affected the health and well-being of the residents.
I have a couple of students, and not just a couple, several students doing research, asking the sponge city, the ecological park, basically how they prefer, increase their preference. So I would say overwhelmingly, people love this space, overwhelmingly. Yeah, we have many publications, my students doing research, dissertation and thesis. Yes, the green space, and they also compare the normal park, which means the lawns, the spruce trees, compare with the natural habitat, more ecological design. Actually, the more ecological design, the native species, the messiness, actually more preference. People prefer more beautiful, like messiness in the center of the city, compared to the shining lawn and pruned vegetation.
Dermot had a comment and a question, I think. Dermot, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thanks very much, Fred. Very interesting talk, Kongjian. I think one of the most important messages that's coming from your talk is at a higher level, and it is to break the association of economic development with environmental damage, which has been prevalent since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So to develop your economy inevitably means you have to put up with damage to your environment. And this is still the prevailing mindset across the world. So if we try to redress environmental damage, it means we must damage as well our economy. When in fact, you've demonstrated, and I think we can all see, that the future will be the reverse of this, where improving your environment actually will advance your economy. And this is a dramatic change in the way society thinks. And the societies that adopt this mindset quicker will be the ones that will benefit the most. It's just something that's very striking in your talk, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, yesterday we just have a discussion about eco-civilization, ecological civilization, not just GDP. It's about the services. Nature provides services, right? The green color is more beautiful than the black gray infrastructure, and the cure and the cover. I mean, tests show that 20% more cover when you get a yield when you look at green instead of look at black. Yeah, totally. So ecology, services, ecology and economy has the same thing. It is the same thing. Ecology, to me, ecology mean nature's economy.
I think it will affect everything. It's going to affect transport. It will affect energy. It will affect agriculture. It will affect the cities, as you have so beautifully explained. And you mentioned just in passing that if you adopt these approaches, the property prices increase. So there's a huge
Thanks.
tripled in the city of Sanya, tripled just in 2 years. You imagine?
True. I think that's thank you, everyone. I think that's a great place to end the discussion this afternoon. We heard that we want to let nature do its work, and I think we've also kind of picked up the meme that we do not want to compete with nature. I think that's also the other very high level message that came through very, very beautifully today. So I'd just like to thank once again Kongjian for his inspiring talk, and all of the expert contributors who were able to participate today. I thank everybody who attended, and I hope you enjoyed the session. We look forward to seeing you at the future sessions. And so and you'll see, just take a quick look at the next two that will be coming up one next month and in September. So goodbye for now to everybody. Take care, and please, everybody, stay safe.